BarnBurner.ca. This is the BarnBurner TV Network on Zingo TV Channel 250. Remember, of course, to download the BarnBurner and Zingo TV apps on your iOS and Android devices. And when you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment as well. Of course, both apps are free, and the Zingo TV app is also, well, Zingo TV itself is also actually available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire Stick TVs, Roku and Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs that are from 2016 and forward. So now this, of course, is Skate Blade for June the 10th. And as I mentioned, I was able to, well, I'm very excited because I was able to interview Carrie Anderson, the skip of Team Anderson, of course, Team Canada from most recently named Team Canada, of course, from winning these past Scotties Tournament of Hearts. And so I got to chat with her on Monday, and I'm very excited to share that with you. So without further ado, I will bring that to you in just a moment, as long as I can share my screen here, because I just need to make sure everything is good here. And let's see, here we go. This is what we'll do. And here we go. And now I'm excited and so happy to be joined by Team Canada representative, at least for now, Carrie Anderson, the skip for Team Canada, formerly skip for Team Manitoba. And it's been a bit of a rocky time for curling right now, but of course, first of all, I always have to ask, how are you doing, and what have you been up to in the quarantine?
Thank you for having me. I've been doing well, holding up here at home, but I'm also going to work too, and I have been throughout this whole COVID situation, and I'm actually a rehab assistant at Bettle Home in Gimli. So I've been going to work wearing the full PPE. So yeah, it's been good. Not too much has changed for me, and I've been trying to be a teacher for my children, which that's been a bit of a struggle.
So I've heard from many of folks.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're hoping for a little bit of a break at some point, but of course, here comes summer, right?
Yes, I know. So just trying to get them to read a bit and do some math, which they're pretty good at, but it's a struggle.
Now, how does the job come into play during the curling season? Are you still working while you're traveling around to tournaments, or do you kind of get to take breaks, or how does that work?
I just use up all my vacation time, and then I use a leave of absence whenever I'm away. But I have really good employer, and coworkers. They're really amazing, and they help me out and help me chase my dream.
Well, and you certainly were able to attain, I think, a lot of that this season in particular, with winning the Scotties in such dramatic fashion as it was, the 8-7 win over Team Homan, and we'll get into that in a little bit of time. But I want to go back to where it all began, in your hometown, and I'm always curious, because it was never offered to me, or never really accessible for me, for whatever reason, to get into curling, to try it. And so I'm always curious as to how that comes about in people's lives.
Well, I started curling when I was 8 years old. My mom curled, and my uncle curled. He's he was a huge curler. He won the actual Brier in 2000 for Team BC, and then he went on to win the Worlds. So right then and there, I knew that this is something that I wanted to do and chase my dreams and to eventually become Team Canada. I actually started curling in a small town called Petersfield, Manitoba. They had a great junior program there and such a beautiful club and fantastic ice, and I just such a supportive community I grew up in. And me and my brother just played. We curled lots. I started before him, and then he started a few years after me. I got him into it, and yeah, so we just grew up with it throughout our family, and my parents always driving us around to skills, and yeah, it was great memories.
Well, and if I read correctly, your hometown is Selkirk, Manitoba.
Well, I live, it's kind of in between Selkirk and Clandeboye, but yeah, so it's right in the middle. But yeah, Selkirk would be my hometown where I was born. But yeah, I just grew up curling in Petersfield.
So from there, I guess you started to pursue it a little bit more professionally and got into mixed curling as well.
Yeah.
And that's something that we really don't see very much of. I mean, they started to bring in the mixed doubles curling, but as far as it was a mixed foursome, correct?
Yeah.
So, oh yes, go ahead. Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, I played with my husband. I actually won my very first Manitoba title playing mixed. In juniors, I was always so close and knocking on the door and never could just get over that hump. So yeah, I won my very first one with Dave Bomer. He was skipping. He's also from Petersfield. And Tamara Botnick. So yeah, it was pretty amazing, and especially to share that with my husband. And we went on to win 4 Manitoba titles with 4 different skips.
So why is it what would you say? I mean, first of all, is that how you met?
Through curling, yeah, pretty much. He played a couple events with my brother, and yeah, him and I got to know each other quite well, and now we're 10 or 12 years later.
There you go, right? So are there any major differences between, women's and men's curling versus mixed curling, or I would assume that it's basically just the same.
It's pretty much basically the same, but you might want to play it a little more aggressive. I know we have in the past, we go a bit more aggressive than other teams, but yeah, it's pretty much the same though.
So, and if the opportunity were to arise that for say Canada were to submit a mixed team to an international tournament or anything like that, would that be something that would interest you as well?
Yeah, that would be fun. It's something different, right? That you don't do on a regular basis.
Well, and that actually is a good transition to my next question is, your latest team. I mean, you've gone through quite the evolution over the past while, and you assembled a team of skippers, which is not something that normally happens, right? So first of all, I want to go back to 2018 and why was it important to have a change, to make a new team for you?
I just needed a bit more of a change, and I think even the other girls that I curled with before, they also needed that change as well. When I put this team together, I was like, oh, I'm not sure if it's going to work. It's a bit of a gamble, but I knew the girls really well and played against them numerous times, and they just jumped on board with it right away. They really embraced their positions and really owned them, and I think that's what it takes. You just put your egos aside. We all want the same thing, the same goal. So yeah, they just knew that they had all the trust in me, and that I can make those big shots when we need it. And they've also become really amazing players at their positions and strong sweepers. And yeah, it's been a pretty amazing position for them.
Well, and I mean, in particular, it kind of looked like you had almost a bit of a rivalry with Val Sweeting before you joined forces, right? So what was...
Yeah, we had some pretty close games and really barn burners. So yeah, we always enjoyed playing against her. Like, I really respect her as a player and a person on and off the ice. So to team up with her was pretty awesome.
Well, and I guess that was kind of going to be my next question. Just what was it? What's the team dynamic been like over the past 2 years as everybody's kind of fallen into place?
It's been really good. We just learning from each other. First year together was a learning curve, and we really gelled. Everything seemed to click in, and even our second year, we're still learning, still a new team, and yeah, we just keep working on those little things and the key things that matter in the game.
Now, I wanted to get your thoughts on this because right around the time when Team Coleman released Lisa, Colleen Jones was talking about how, you know, it's very difficult to become a lead after you've been playing another position for such a long time, that lead is very much an art form. And so I kind of wanted your thoughts on how Brianne has started to almost, I mean, I guess you could say either go against that thought process or has at least transitioned into lead for you to, I guess, learn the art form, as Colleen would say.
Yeah, she, just from playing against her for so many years, I knew she would be a really great lead, because anytime you were playing against her, you'd be set up really well, and she would just draw to that button like no problem. And I was like, oh. I knew she just was a really good touch player and just really dials in and focuses on those shots. And she just has that feel, that natural feel when she just gets in the hack, and she just knows right away what she's throwing.
So out of those qualities that you kind of mentioned there, what would you say is the top thing that makes a lead that much better?
I would say feel. When you're just going off the feel instead of always playing with numbers, I think that is key. Because sometimes if you're using, say, hog time, sometimes it doesn't always help. So just going by feel and just saying, like, got to take 2 feet off of that, or it feels 6 feet heavier, or yeah. So I think that is what makes it a really good lead.
And of course, I mean, her and the rest of the team, yourself, had probably your best, or certainly one of your best seasons this past year. And so I'm always curious, because it's curling is kind of a stop and go sport, right? You have your tournament and then you're off, and then you're back on again and then you're off. And so what's your team strategy for kind of maintaining consistency in the level of performance that you want, you know, week in and week out at moving around to all the different tournaments?
Well, definitely making sure we're getting our rest in between those, and working on those areas that we need to improve on. Say if we're at steel and we're really struggling with, say, that touch draw weight or the outturn draw weight, or just coming back home and going to our home club and just really focusing on perfecting those areas that you need help in. So even after being gone for a week, you come home and you still practice four times a week. So never really stop. As for me, I just always want to be perfect. So I just keep working hard and working on those tendencies that I have, and just staying strong.
Now, I guess this would kind of be the off season for you, you know, through the summer and whatnot. So what, if your schedule was allowed to be what it would normally be, what would that be?
Like our schedule right now?
For the off season, yeah.
For the off season, we would just do like our off season training. We have trainers that give us workout programs, and I'm actually trying to do like every single day, I have a Fitbit that I just keep looking at, or just trying to challenge myself every day to get stronger and stronger, and just not knowing yet when our season's going to start. You just want to keep staying fit and being in shape.
And of course, it is all still kind of very much up in the air at the moment. And, you know, I do want to touch on when it all started, that the World Championships were canceled, and this would have been your first. So I guess just looking back, I mean, can you tell me how that all felt and what helped you move forward and say, okay, that, you know, we can still get through to the next season?
Yeah, it was very devastating for us. Our first time there, and Val and I have lost the final so many times that to finally make it there, and then you sit there and think, and a pandemic happens. Like, what is that?
Of course.
Or like, what is this? But when we arrived in Prince George, it was still up in the air if it was going to start or not. But we just kept going forward, did our grocery shopping, and kept thinking positive that it'll still happen. And but then when we got the news that it was canceled, yeah, it was for sure devastating. But it was for a good reason to be cancel it. It was very scary times, so it was good for everyone, I think. But yeah, to try and move forward from that, you just kind of put it aside, and you can't do anything about it. You can't change it. So we'll just keep fighting even harder and harder to win again, and just then finally represent at World. So that would be great.
So what are those next steps for your team then? I mean, obviously, once everything gets back to normal, then things start to be announced that you can do things again. Obviously, that will kind of help knowing what the next step is. But once that kind of comes through, what's the plan going forward?
Going forward, just talking with our sports psychologist and just keeping up with your mental strength, and we're just gonna keep going forward as we would normally do if our season was to start. We're just looking at our schedule and figuring out what we want to play in, and then just kind of taking it day by day with everything. So hopefully we'll get started when we normally do, but yeah, we're just kind of keeping it the same routine and doing what we normally do in previous seasons.
Now, I also want to ask this question, but you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But we have been seeing kind of the fallout from the COVID-19 from some teams, you know, either struggling with sponsors or even losing kind of more local sponsors that themselves aren't able to help out anymore. I want to know what you have been experiencing on that side.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a struggle to find sponsorship. We do have a couple of returning sponsors, which is really nice, and we truly appreciate their support. But yeah, it's a little scary actually. So we'll just you just don't know who to ask, when to ask, if it's even an appropriate question to ask someone, right? So, or a company. So we'll just wait for things to just calm down a bit more, and then maybe we can start approaching businesses.
Well, and fingers crossed for all that, of course. Now, I want to talk about as well I mentioned Lisa Weigel already, the free agent frenzy that we saw, sort of an unprecedented amount of changes in the curling world, both in men's and women's. So I just wanted to see what you thought about that, because I mean, you haven't made any changes to your team. So waking up in the morning and looking at your phone and going, oh, wow, that's happened.
Yeah, it was actually a bit of a surprise. I didn't realize there would be that many changes, but this is probably the year to do it, because then you have 2 more years till that Olympic trials. So yeah, I was surprised for those teams, but this is the time.
And for you now, does that kind of change any strategies or methods of play depending on who you're going to be playing now with all those changes?
No, it doesn't really change anything for me, I don't think.
just sticking with it.
Just keep doing what we're doing, and yeah, it seems to be working.
So now with everything that's going on, you know, we're hearing the possibility of still continuing with curling events, but maybe without fans, or maybe localizing, kind of similar plans to what the NHL and the NBA are trying to do. Do you think that would be a viable option, or how do you see the landscape of curling as far as events go?
It's definitely going to be different without fans. That's what gets you going. That's what gets the adrenaline and the goosebumps, and you know, it'll be a change. So going forward with that, it is what it is, but we'd be happy to be even on that ice, so we'll take it.
Well, and I wonder, so would there be anything that they could do to kind of help, maybe even simulate like fan noise, or do you think any of that would do anything? Or
I don't know, or if you can even just let in a certain amount of fans, or like have them sit like 3 to 4 seats away, just kind of like mark where people can sit. That's something what I thought about. But then I just, it's hard to say what to do and what the right call is. So it'll definitely be different.
It is, and of course we'll keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully things work out. And you know, I mean, best of luck to you, of course. Now I have to say, I don't really know, and I'm sure there's other folks that don't, where to get some curling merchandise, because I'm sure you can see behind me that this is all hockey stuff, right?
It's all hockey.
Well, and there's a football jersey in there too, but. So
Dynasty Curling. They have lots of sweaters, and they even make our jerseys and stuff. So you could probably order something off there, or It's Dynasty makes everything for us.
Dynasty, and of course that would help support the curling community as well, I'm sure.
Yes.
Just, you know, helping out. So if anybody watching, listening is interested in doing that, check out, was it Dynasty?
Yep, Dynasty Curling.
Dynasty Curling, and, you know, grab yourself something that you can put on your wall like me, right?
Yeah, add to your wall.
Now, I did want to circle back just to kind of close things off. Obviously, with again everything that's going on, the work that you're doing, is it considered frontline duty?
Yes, we. It's an elderly home where I work, and we actually had a scare back in early April, but it came back as a false positive, which was a sign of relief for a lot of us. And we've been doing our best to keep the residents there safe and healthy, and ourselves as well. So yeah, every time we walk in, we do a full screen and ask us questions, and we put on our eyewear and our masks. It's definitely, now that it's getting warmer out, it's very harder to breathe in them. Today I was having a difficult time, but it's for the safety of everyone. Right, and I mean, of course, with what we've seen across Ontario and Quebec in the elderly homes, I'm sure it was a very scary time for you back in April, but that's wonderful that it's been safe, and you're continuing to stay safe, and everybody in their home is also staying healthy as well. And of course, you know, we all appreciate the work that you're doing, and everybody else, you know, at your home and across the country is doing as well. So thank you for that. Thank you very much.
And I think that just about wraps it up. Unless you have anything else to say.
I don't. I think I'm good.
All right. So, well, I always ask, where can people find you on social media to stay in touch, see what's going on with you, and keep up to date?
Yeah, we have our curling Facebook page, Team Carrie Anderson, and also on Twitter and on Instagram. Yeah, we're on all three.
So just search up Team Carrie Anderson, and they have their own website, of course, as well. That I'm sure you post updates and whatnot as well. There you go. So thank you, Carrie, and thank you very much for joining Skate Blade, and good luck with everything that's going on. I hope you have a wonderful summer, and look forward to potentially chatting again and seeing how the curling season unfolds this fall.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
And that was Carrie Anderson. I got to chat with her on Monday afternoon. So thank you to her for taking the time to chat with me there. Now, there hasn't been a whole lot going on in the curling world in the last little while, but I do have a couple other stories that have come out recently that I'd like to touch on just before I bring on Elizabeth Rossett-Sand again. Of course, her filling in for me last week. I had to have her on again for an appreciation of that as well. But the LPGA has announced that they've canceled the Evian Championship Major, and this is a huge part of their program. And I mean, it's the first major of the season, usually, or, you know, kind of earlier on in the calendar, because it is in August now. They've cited the ongoing travel and border restrictions and government quarantine requirements as the reason that they're not going to hold this tournament, which is usually at least scheduled this season from August 6th to 9th. Now, it will return as scheduled next year. But it's obviously, I mean, they've already had to revise their schedule, the LPGA, already brought on by the pandemic. It was the first of 3 European events that was to be preceding the ladies Scottish Open and the women's British Open as well. Those two events do remain on the schedule, but the LPGA, excuse me, that tour is set to resume, or at least try and get started for this season in Ohio with the Marathon Classic at the end of July 23rd to 26th. Now, the ANA Inspiration in California, that was originally scheduled for the first week of April. That's been moved back to September, early September. The Women's PGA Championship around Philadelphia is scheduled for October 8th to 11th. And then the US Open is December 3rd or 10th to 13th in Houston. And that's 3 weeks after the LPGA Tour season concludes with the CME Group Tour Championship in Florida in late October. So things are still all kind of very much being rescheduled for various different sports as we see now. Some fun news though. There's a digital friendly tennis tournament that's going to be taking place in southern France this Saturday. Actually, there's going to be many top 10 ranked players involved. Now, the co-founder, he's hoping that it's being branded the Ultimate Tennis Showdown, and he's hoping that the first edition, obviously this is going to feature guys like Stefanos Tsitsipas and US Open semifinalist Matteo Berrettini. I stumbled over that, but that's okay. They're hoping that this can change the way tennis is viewed and kind of bring tennis to a younger audience, because tennis has been very traditionally on television with commentators and whatnot, but they're trying to bring, the trend very much seems to be bringing the players closer to the people. And so you're supposed to, they're trying to access the raw feelings of the players that are on the court. So in this specific tournament, it's going to be 5 weeks. Players are going to compete every weekend for the next 5 weeks in a round robin format. And their matches will stream live on a platform. It's not been released which platform that will be yet, but there'll be multiple screens, cameras, speakers capturing every sight and sound. And so that will kind of bring in, I guess, the accessibility to all of the players. And we've seen Montreal's Felix Auger-Aliassime is going to be there. So we've got a Canadian connection there as well. The 19-year-old will be, he's already living in Monaco. So it helps with giving him access to this tournament, along with several other tennis players that live in Monaco as well, and where this is going to be held about 50 kilometers up the coast in France from Monaco. But this is perfect timing, because those were the two stories that I wanted to cover before bringing on Elizabeth Rossitson, and here she is. So thank you, Elizabeth, for being back on the show. And of course, I have to thank you for covering for me last week on my week off. I thought your breakdown of all the new figure skating rules and regulations and how it's all going to be judged going forward was very in-depth. And we could even talk a little bit more about that if you'd like, but welcome back to the show, of course.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure being here.
Now, so, we could actually even start with that a little bit. I know I'm kind of going off the board with that, because it wasn't part of our original rundown, but I want, you kind of had a week to process everything that you were talking about last week. And I wondered just kind of what your kind of now feeling about some of the changes, because we all kind of got the sense of certain ones that you thought were good and certain ones that you didn't think were good. So have any of those changed? Has there been any kind of progress or new developments that would have affected that?
Well, you know what? Not really much has changed since last week. I tried to do my best last week to break down the kind of rules that certain people might not know about, because some of the rules I didn't even know about because they were honestly kind of just weird, and some of them I found unnecessary. You know, people who tuned in last week could know my opinion on that, but honestly, not much has changed. I'm assuming a lot of the rules will change. We're supposed to change actually after this year, after the 2022 Winter Olympics, because there are a bunch of rule changes every Olympic cycle. But I don't know, maybe even though it doesn't affect the Winter Olympics so far, I don't know, maybe the pandemic will push back some of the rule changes. So I'm not sure about that, but I really hope that, you know, especially the rule about the leotards, I think skaters, there should be a bit more freedom with that, as I discussed last week. But other than that, honestly, there hasn't been any changes so far, obviously, because even the figure skating season isn't back on yet, but I did kind of review, they did release a schedule for the 2021 season of figure skating, which is great. So I was happy to kind of announce that.
Well, and it's exactly what I was talking about with Carrie Anderson as well. You know, it's all kind of tentative, right? So I mean, fingers crossed that it can go forward in whatever modified way it can. But let's get into kind of one of the biggest stories in the sports world, at least, surrounding kind of everything that's happening in the world right now, is that a multitude of NHL players have come together to form the Hockey Diversity Alliance, and that this alliance is going to be aimed at removing racism in sport. Now, it's kind of led, I mean, the main charge was led by Akim Aliu, who's kind of been around the hockey world now since he came out about his struggles in hockey, and that also led to, of course, the dismissal of Bill Peters as the head coach of the Calgary Flames as well. And now San Jose Shark forward Evander Kane has kind of stepped in and is the co-leader right now. So Akim Aliu is the more retired representee, and then Kane is the current player representee, and there's multitudes of other players that are involved, of course, folks like Matt Dumba, Trevor Daley, the list goes on. Wayne Simmons is a big part of this as well. And so I wanted to start by just going over kind of what they want to do. And I wanted to have this a part of Skateblade because yes, it's a men's professional sport initiative, but it covers more than that. They are involving women's hockey players of color as well. They have been reaching out to folks like, I believe, I would speculate Sarah Nurse. I haven't seen any confirmation of that yet, but I definitely know I have seen on Twitter that there are female hockey players of color that have been reached out to as well. But basically, their mission statement in kind of paraphrased is they want to promote diversity at all levels of the game through community outreach and engagement with youth, endeavoring to make the game of hockey more affordable and accessible. They're focusing on educating the hockey community about the racism issues confronting the sport while advocating for acceptance and equality. And we've seen already some of the players kind of calling out some of their big name stars. They called out guys like Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, folks like that, who have now come out in support of the movement and had their own statements as well. And that's kind of been a bit of an issue in sports as a whole, is that players have always kind of been told, oh, well, just, be quiet and play your sport and don't have an opinion and don't use your platform to have an opinion and be a part of something bigger. And that rhetoric has been especially present in hockey. And so for me, I think, I mean, I've been rambling on about this already, but for me, I think this is an incredible initiative. And quite frankly, I'm confused as to how it's taken so long for something like this to come forward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think this is a amazing thing that they're doing. I think it's really important, especially in the NHL, because I feel like there is still, I feel like a lot of coaches and people in the NHL are still really old school, and there have been a lot of racial issues in the NHL in the past. So I'm really, you know, obviously everyone heard the story with the Kimalu, how he had trouble with the coach and everything like that. So, and there's been other incidents like that. So I think it's really important for, especially, you know, obviously all sports leagues, but especially the NHL, to do something like this. And something that really stood out to me about this diversity alliance was that the players decided to do this separately separately from the NHL. So they're not technically doing it through the NHL, and they're not kind of affiliated with the NHL. So that was something, I think that's something to be mentioned, because usually if something like this is formed within a sport or a league, it's done through, you know, through the league and through the league's commissioner. But now the players just took initiative and did this by themselves, and kind of organized this by themselves. And I think this is really important, because it's not just, you actually know the names of the actual people who are doing this. It's not just, oh, the NHL is doing this. I feel like when you hear the names of the people, it's more relatable, and it feels more real. And I feel they'll be able to accomplish a lot with this. And it's really nice just to see a lot of NHLers speaking out about the current issues that have been happening, because you know, we've heard a lot of people speak out about this from other leagues like the NBA and NFL especially, but the NHL has often been pretty quiet. But now a lot of players are coming out and speaking out about this, and I think that's great, and I think it's really important to do that. And yeah, once again, I think the formation of this alliance is great, and I think it's great that it's a separate thing from the NHL. But the NHL commissioner, Gary Bettman, did say that he wants to be affiliated with this, and he wants to help them out. And they made actually a video with some of the players. It was called "In Union There Is Strength," and they did it to, again, diversify the hockey culture. So the NHL is doing a lot, and I think that's really great.
And I mean, to your point as well, it's kind of been a problem with hockey in general that when players have felt that things are not to their liking, it's been them that has had to make the change almost separate, as you say, from the league. I mean, we can go back to when Ted Lindsay first formed the NHL Players Association. That was all because the league was not treating its players properly. And now, again, this is because the league, the sport, is not treating these players properly. And so it's an unfortunate kind of pattern that seems to be recurring in hockey, where everybody just kind of thinks everything's okay until it's very much not, and there's no proactivity in the hockey world. And I hope that this can be something that really brings that proactivity to the sport of hockey, because it is a predominantly white sport. It kind of has been for a very long time. And I mean, you can hear it from all of the players who have gone through it already, whether they are retired now or they are still in the league, that their path has been very much, it's not a very well-trod path. And so I am hoping that, you know, they want accessibility. And I think that is a big proponent as well, that I think that hockey has not been accessible for a very long time to a very large group of people. And for this to be doing that, and we're finally seeing the big names, you know, the Sidney Crosbys, you know, the names that everybody associates with hockey coming out and saying, yes, we want to be a part of this. I think that is a massive part of this as well. And one of the most moving things that I've seen so far was the statement from Washington Capitals goaltender Braden Holtby, who came on Twitter for the first time since 2017. This man has not tweeted anything in 3 years. And he came on and said, I'll read the statement to you. I know I will truly never know what it's like to walk in a black man's shoes, but I know I have arms, ears, and a voice to walk beside and listen to every word of anguish and give my strength to every black man, woman, or child until their shoes weigh the same as mine. And there's a bit, he's got a much longer statement associated with it as well, but that's kind of the main message of it. And, you know, it's, I think that's probably one of the most powerful statements we've seen from any hockey player so far.
Yeah, it's really touching. And it's, you know, as you said, he hasn't been on Twitter since 2017. So obviously this issue is so important that people who aren't usually even active or on social media and try to keep their lives private are also going out and speaking out on what happened and all these current issues going on. So I think that's, as you said, it was really touching and empowering. And I think everyone should do that. And as you mentioned, I think it's so important for people to hear these big names like Sidney Crosby, BK Subban, you know, coming out and talking about this and supporting, you know, the NHL and different race players in the NHL. I think that's extremely important, and I think this alliance will do just that. But another thing that I think is important to kind of bring out is that a while ago, players couldn't even speak out because they were scared to, you know, lose their spot on the team. They were afraid of people's reactions. So the NHL has to be more proactive now, but now at least players are not afraid to speak out. They're not afraid to bring out an issue. They're not, you know, they're not afraid to kind of speak out about what's wrong. While as before, even, you know, 5 years ago, I don't think players would be as comfortable doing that. So I think their progress has been made. It could be made faster and more proactive, but I think there has been a lot of progress. So, you know, it's always good to look at the positives, and I think there are positives as well.
And I would say even as recent as last year, I think players were still very afraid to come out and speak about what some of the things that go on behind closed doors. I mean, we can talk about the Mitch Marner situation with Mike Babcock, where he was asked to make a list of who he thought the hardest and least hardworking players on the team were. And, you know, while Mike Babcock has come out and apologized and said that, you know, maybe that wasn't the best method of coaching, and that Mitch Marner did end up saying, you know, he was uncomfortable with it, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world, you know, so, and that's just, but that's still, you know, coming from those of privilege, right? This is this is about those who have been just discriminated against their entire playing careers. And so on top of it, the alliance is going to be partnering with a charitable fiscal sponsor as well, and we'll launch a charitable division in the coming weeks. So do keep an eye out for that. If you're a diehard hockey fan and you want to have diversity in hockey just as much as everyone else that's a part of this is, consider donating to it, or, you know, just reading up more on it. And a point that I want to make before we move on for the last segment here is that the Phoenix Coyotes are kind of ahead of the game, at least in the diversity side of things. It's not necessarily Black folk, but they have hired their first Latino president in NHL history. Now, Alex Mariuello has become the first Latino to have controlling ownership of an NHL franchise when he purchased the Arizona Coyotes last year. And now this past week, he named the first Latino team president and CEO in NHL history. So I think that's a note to acknowledge as well. But we do have to move on to what Hockey Canada has been talking about in the statements that were released from them as well, as far as their ban on their sanctioned activities. They are lifting the ban and allowing the country's 13 member organizations to individually determine when it's safe to return to play. Now, the best approach for a resumption plan they felt was for each member to work with the regional public health authorities to determine the appropriate steps of returning, because of course the experience that the province of Ontario is having with COVID-19 is completely different to the province of Alberta, to the territories, to Newfoundland, Nova Scotia. It's all over the map. So they've decided to let each provincial jurisdiction decide what's going on.
Yeah, I think it's, in a way, I have different point of views to this statement. I think from a certain point, it's a good thing because, as you just said, I mean, obviously the pandemic is still pretty bad in, Ontario, Quebec, but other provinces and other regions, it's not as bad, and there are almost no cases in some regions. So I don't see a reason why they can come back. Obviously, they should be given that opportunity to decide for themselves. But what I am kind of skeptical about is, this could lead to some members rushing to kind of bring their players back and bring everything back and kind of maybe put their, players and coaches in danger. And I don't want to see that. I think safety should be the #1 priority right now. I really hope all the members take the proper precautions and really do follow the regional public health authorities and really kind of, protect their players and protect their teams, because I think that's the most important thing right now. But I think it's good that they're lifting kind of the ban, because especially now that most sports are kind of coming back in July, I think now is an appropriate time to lift the ban. I think if this would have happened, a month ago or even 2-3 weeks ago, I would have been kind of more iffy about it. But now I feel like it's more appropriate. I hope they don't rush anything, and I hope they take all the right safety precautions and just keep everyone safe. We don't, especially now with everything going on in the world, obviously with the protests and everything, it's not the safest, it's not the safest time, and the virus can spread, and a lot of people are talking about a second wave. So I just hope Hockey Canada and all the members, they manage the situation really closely and, obviously follow all the health precautions.
Well, and I think we can, or I think there's some lessons that could be learned from how other countries handled things. There's some European countries that have basically almost completely reopened because they completely shut down and then were able to open up again, basically, because they essentially eradicated it. But quickly, before we go, we have to acknowledge that Haley Irwin has retired from the Olympic women's hockey team. She won gold in 2010 and 2014 and silver in 2018, compiling 38 goals, 42 assists, in 108 career games, and she's now the assistant coach of the Ryerson University Rams women's hockey team. So congratulations to her. Elizabeth, thank you for being on the show once again. You know, I'm sure we'll have you on again soon. And thank you for covering for me last week as well. This show, Skate Blade, of course, can also be heard on the BarnBurner Radio Network on its 122 platforms. Please check out barnburner.ca for all the news. Watch it, read it, hear it, download it, and stay tuned for OHL The Bark coming up at the bottom of the hour.